Hey everyone, Stellar here. After my long hiatus from YouTube, today we're going to make a C-axe or a Seeks knife. There's currently a flash challenge in the Hops Cutter Discord, and I'll have that linked down below. The rules to the challenge are pretty simple, is to make a C-axe. So I've chosen a Norse/Viking looking one for my entry into the challenge, and we're going to make it today. So I want to make it game ready as well, so why not? So let's go ahead and get started. So I like to usually start with the blade of the knife whenever I make knives. So I'm just going to add in a plane and then rotate it on the Y by 90. We'll just make it pretty small here. And just kind of get it lined up with what we've got on as far as our reference goes. Just going to take this here and scoot it up. But yeah, I seen this challenge in the Discord and I was looking at it for a couple of days. I was like, I don't want to make a knife, but then I kept thinking about it even more. I was like, you know what? I kind of actually want to make a knife, so that's what we're doing. I do apologize for not being on YouTube for a long while. I've just had a lot going on in my personal life and all that good stuff, so I'm definitely getting back into it slowly, so I appreciate those of you who have stuck along and messaged me asking me if I'm okay. I am, in fact, okay. A lot of time that I spent on that course that I made, my Game Ready AR-15 course, kind of dried me out a little bit, even though I hadn't even been doing that much 3D work in the first place. But moving on from that, we're just adding in edge loops here to kind of get our base shape going for the blade. In fact, we're just going to merge these two together at center. And then we're just going to add some loop cuts in just to add a little bit more love and support. And I'm just going to bevel that just slightly so we have a nice curve going on there, and I'm just going to do this one as well. But if you're not part of the Hops Cutter Discord, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of great people, a lot of great artists there. Master Xeon posts a lot of useful stuff, and so do other people such as Ponty and Josh Gambrill every now and then, along with a couple other great fantastic artists. So I highly recommend going and at least just checking it out because it is well worth the visit. So I'm just going to add some of this stuff in here and then use loop tools to flatten that line a bit, even though that didn't do what I wanted it to do. So we're just going to change it to view. Well, maybe not. Alright, so moving along, we're just going to Control Z that off, and instead I'm just going to knife cut it. So go into K here, knife cut it straight along. I'm happy with that position. The only small issue is that it decided it wanted to be a pane here, but we can fix that. No big deal. So I'm just going to move these up just to get them to where they need to be, and instead of GG sliding it, I'm just going to push it straight up on the Z, and then we can slide this one here. There are plenty of ways to make a knife, especially for a video game. I've done it like this before and I've had success, and I quite like doing it like this. There's other ways like subdivision modeling and everything. It's just I've never been a fan of subdivision modeling. I've never quite been able to nail it. And I did not mean to fat finger that. Kind of got to get reused to this, especially if I, for those of you who've taken an extended break from Blender, whenever you come back to it, it's almost like you got to reteach yourself a lot of the hotkeys and everything. It can get a bit annoying sometimes. So we've kind of got the shape down here. What I'm going to do is just Q, add modifier, and solidify, and I'm just going to press 2 to make it extend from the center. Don't want it too terribly thick here. We can go ahead and apply the solidify modifier. And then now what I'm going to do is just Shift S and then origin to geometry, and then put a mirror on it just so we have that line down the middle there. And then I'm going to go back into mirror again, just grab all of these edges here, push them into the center, just like so. And we can apply the mirror, mesh, clean up, merge by distance, and that cleaned up the edge right there. So we kind of have our shape going. We can kind of clean things up a little bit more if we want, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks at this point. In my reference looking up adventures, I've found that the CX knives are pretty thick, so we can kind of go ahead and get away with it being this thick. So I'm pretty happy with how this looks. I'm going to go ahead and sharpen it just to kind of clean up some edges here. Mark that as sharp as well. It probably wouldn't hurt to move our reference image out of the way just a smidge bit. Now I'm going to go in and turn off my apply seam for the sharp options here just by pressing Control tilde. And I'm just going to uncheck that, and we're going to go through and just clear, not clear sharps, we don't want to do that. We're just going to unmark seams, clear seams, and we're left with that. So this will work pretty good for me. Let's see what it looks like with a bevel on it. If we notice, the bevel kind of freaks out down there along the edge because it doesn't have enough love and support in its life. So what we can do, look at it from the side view here and go ahead and press C with the knife just so we have a straight line. And we can try that bevel once more, and it keeps freaking out on us. So how do we fix this here issue? So to fix the issue, what we're going to do, grab this point and this point here. We're just going to join that together just to kind of give it some support across this large face here. And then we're going to add the bevel modifier and kind of crank it up just a little bit, and we're going to change it from angle to weight. If you'll notice, we have a nice thick bevel going on, and I'm just going to scoot these guys out of the way just a little bit because it's kind of messing with my bevel slightly. So we got a nice bevel on that. I'm pretty happy with how the blade turned out. It was really quick and dirty. Next up, we need to make the handle, so I'm just going to grab a cylinder here. We're going to go ahead and leave it at 32 verts because that's more than fine for a video game. Rotate it a bit. Get it into position. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything. We're just following this reference loosely here. But I am going to place it right about there, and we're just going to grab this face here, pull it out, kind of scale it up a little bit and down, just to where we're kind of matching a little bit there. And then we're going to take it and just kind of squish it a little bit on the x-axis, just to kind of give it more of an oval shape instead of such a round shape. And in fact, we can grab this face here and just do it a little bit more on that end to where it kind of tapers slightly. So now that it's kind of tapered, we can go in and kind of extract this little bit of an area there. So I'm just going to add in a loop cut, scoot it up, Do the same thing on this side, add a loop, get it scooted up there. And instead of separating these pieces, we can go ahead and keep it on the same mesh. So what I'm going to do is take both of these edges here, and we're just going to bevel them one segment. Make it slightly bigger. I'm going to take these, S shift Y, make them a little bit bigger than what's on that. Then we can go back into X-ray mode here and just kind of select some of these faces and start pulling them out a little bit here. And I want to make sure I've selected all of them and not just a few of them, so let's go ahead and get those. Pull it out, and in fact we can go ahead and deselect those because it's going to work to our advantage. And we can grab this face and just pull it out. Like I said, we don't have to have it perfect or anything. Go ahead and grab these edges here. I'm just going to scoot them out slightly. Just to where we have that kind of shape going on. And if we'll notice, it is a little bit off center, so we can go ahead, because I'm assuming the knife is a bit off center. It would be a bit weird if that were as far up as it is, but we'll go ahead and leave it there. I'm going to go ahead and Control Y that back in, and we can do the same thing for the other side because it's a knife. We're going to assume it's hand forged, so it can be a little bit off, but I'm just following my reference here. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm not aiming for perfect. If you want perfect, then honestly, there's other people who could probably do it way better than me, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. Make sure I'm grabbing the right ones here, which I am. Just kind of want to pull those out a little bit. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to, if you're following along. But I like to maintain it as best as I can, and then from here what I'm going to do is just take this edge and this edge, but before we bevel them, I'm going to go ahead and apply the scale. Just add a nice little chamfer to it, make it look good. Go ahead and sharpen it, slap a bevel onto it, not too meaty. We do have a slight bit of a strong edge here, so I can add just a loop cut into here, a loop cut into here. That kind of gets rid of that sharp edge, and then we'll do just 2 down the center just to kind of smooth that out. Or if you want to, you can add a weighted normal modifier to it, and that should clean it up a little bit. But in fact, we're going to go ahead and keep that weighted normal back on because it kind of cleans up things just a little bit for us, makes it a little bit neater and more easy to handle. So I like it the way it is here. Final step, what we can do is we can add that little loop in, and that's going to be a pretty simple thing to do. We can just add in a torus, leave it at the geometry that it is at. We'll go ahead and scoot it back a little bit and down. And I'm going to just grab from here over to here, back over to there, too far. Selecting all that, and then I'm going to just extrude it along the y-axis like so. But if you realize we didn't go far enough down, so we'll go ahead and grab that as well. And then we can extrude it straight out. Going to go to Loop Tools and flatten it, even though that did not work at all. Let's try that again. Loop Tools, flatten. And we'll go to Best Fit instead. I can just go ahead and get rid of those faces. Do it like so, and we'll rotate it on the Y by 90. Make it a wee bit smaller. We basically just wanted that hard shape there. So we can sharpen it, bevel it if we want. I kind of like the way it looks, so we can go from here. Next up, all I'm going to do is just mirror modify pretty much everything here, just to make sure we are matching and all that good stuff. So now that we're done, we can go ahead and name these things appropriately. So I'm just going to name these their appropriate low and highs. So this will be our high poly ring handle underscore high, and we'll just do that. Okay, now that we've labeled them appropriately, we can go ahead and get rid of our reference image because we don't need it anymore. We're pretty much finished. I'm going to take both of these, duplicate them, duplicate these, make sure we're good, which we are, and anything that has the 01 on the end of it we can just rename to low. Now that we have it on the low, we can go ahead and a lot of people might not like what I'm about to do, but you know, it is what it is, and we're just gonna do it anyways. With the bevel modifier, if we go into wireframe, we'll notice that this is too many bevels for video games. It could work technically because we only have 12,000 tries in total here, which this is perfectly fine for a video game weapon. It's just a little on the high poly side for my liking. So what we can do is we can increase the bevel on certain things if we want to, or we can decrease it and take it completely off and bake it, but I want to do the segments, like a 1 segment or 2 segment bevel on it, just to maintain some of this nice bevel here, so when we do bake it, it'll look good, whereas instead of if you get close, you'll have really sharp edges, no matter whether you bake it or not. So I'm just going to hide all of the lows here, and I know you can do it in different collections. I'm just lazy and I don't want to, so don't hate me. So now that we have those hidden, we can go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about. So if we get rid of the bevel completely and bake it and turn off the bevel, you'll notice the tip moves from one point to another, and it'll cause really crappy bakes, and we don't want really crappy bakes. So in order to stop that from happening, we can go down to a 2-segment bevel. Some people call this a 2-segment bevel or Korean bevel, either which way, it doesn't matter. It still maintains pretty much the same profile as the 3-segment bevel does, whereas it's just a 2-segment bevel. So the bake will come out nicer, and it's all easy and ready to go. So I'm just going to do that to all of these here. But we don't want to do it on the high poly. Instead, what we can do on the high poly is just increase the bevel a little bit, just for a smoother transition, but we don't have to. So I'm going to go back down to 3. I'm going to hide all my high and bring up the lows. And with the bevel, turn it down to 2 segments and then apply it. 2 segments and apply. Two segments and we can apply it. Now there is a really cool feature in Blender. If you have like a 2-segment bevel, you can add a weighted normal modifier and it'll look like it's all nicely beveled. So that's what I'm going to do on this. Instead of baking, I have these others just in case I do want to bake it, if I want to remesh it or whatever, but we're just going to do it like so. Okay, with the weighted normal it looks pretty good, and we can go in and start grabbing and marking seams. So I'm just going to grab this here, the entire edge loop down the center. I'm going to go ahead and fix my camera because it was being a little weird. And we can grab this one too. We don't need this one here marked. Instead, we can do these edges here as a seam. It really doesn't matter as long as it lays flat and looks pretty good. You can pretty much have a seam whichever way you want. So, go ahead and mark that as a seam straight down the center. And I'm just going to add a support seam here. We can grab this entire edge as well. Make sure we're not going up into that, which we are not. Grab that edge, mark it as a seam. And if we notice a small little area in which we can fix, just go ahead and merge it at last, and then I'm going to shoot over to that there. We can go ahead and mark this as a seam as well. Doesn't really matter as long as it unwraps well. There's no super secret on how to do it correctly. Just mark the seams and continue along. In fact, I'm going to go from here all the way up to here and then back down to there. And that's not at all the right one that I grabbed, but instead of going there, we can just go from here. Mark that as a seam as well, just so we have this little area that might mess up in the unwrap. So we'll just go ahead and mirror modify that over to where we're good on both sides. For this, we're just going to be simple with it. Grab the line straight down the center, mark it as a seam. We're going to take the edge right here, mark as a seam, and this inner edge here. Pretty much just going to go in and manually click it all since it doesn't want to act like a loop. Mark that as a seam. Go from here down to there. Just go through and make sure it's all seamed up and ready to go. And I apologize if you hear a dog barking in the background. I have the windows open because it is hot. Mark seam. Mark seam, and then I'm just going to go on the bottom loop here. It doesn't have to be super precise. Wrong one, we don't want the edge crease, we'll just do the mark seam. inside and outside so we don't have any weird bending issues, and then we can go ahead and do that and mirror modify it over, just making sure we are good to go. And on this, I'm just going to go down the center, go ahead and Shift H this just so we can focus on it a little bit better. Mark seam. I'm going to just take this whole edge here. Same thing on the other side here. Mark it as a seam, and I'm just going to cut this in half and mark it as a seam so we have a little bit better of a layout on our UVs. Going to do the same here. And here, we don't have to go this overboard with seams, but that's just my decision. If you're following along, you can do it however which way you want to do it, but I'm just doing it this way. I'll mark that as a seam as well. And then we can add a mirror modifier and we're good to go. So I'm going to Alt-H that and get rid of our highs here because honestly we just don't need them. So I'm just going to click them and just get rid of them. So we have all of this pretty much unwrapped and ready to go. I'm going to start adding the Triangulate modifier to it. Once we've added it, we can just pretty much apply it. I applied the wrong one there. And the weighted normal keeps things looking pretty nice, even though we do have a couple of little weird artifacts. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but we can easily cover that up in the texturing, especially these lines here since this handle is going to be wood. So now that we have the Triangulate applied, we can go ahead and apply the weighted normal on everything, and I'm just going to select all of these and go into the UV editing tab here. U unwrap. It looks like a pretty decent unwrap to me. I'm going to go and use Packmaster. You can use any packing thing you want. I like to use Packmaster, and I'm just going to give it a pixel margin of 8. Select Pack. We'll just validate the UVs. Overlap check, and we have no overlaps or any issues. We're just going to take a closer look and press Pack again, see if it can get it in there a little bit tighter, which it did manage to kind of fill up some of that space, and I'm happy with it. But before we do anything, I'm going to change and go ahead and give it a material. I'll just do knife. Knife, because if we don't rename it, it will give it a name of default material inside of Substance Painter. So the very next step, what we can do is scale it down to be a proper size for a game. So we can either do that by bringing in a UE4 character or a size reference or whatever. I'm just going to use a UE4 character as my size reference. Now that I have my UE4 guy in here, we'll realize that it is a little bit large. This is going to be one large knife, so we can go ahead and scale it down just to kind of get it about the right size if we want. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this guy instead of rotating the knife out of pure laziness. That works for me, so we can go ahead and get rid of the dude there. Go ahead and apply the scale, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it back into position here. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. I just kind of wanted it as close to the 0 point as it possibly can. So make sure the scale is applied, and once it's all applied and unwrapped, you can go ahead and export it. So I'm going to export it as an FBX. Make sure you click Limit to Selected Objects, and we're just going to click Mesh. And then for our geometry, the smoothing, we're going to select it Face. And then find a good position for it to go. I like to usually create a new folder for it, so I can drag and drop it into my assets folder later. So I'm going to just name it CX_knife. Go ahead and export it. Save it, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up Substance Painter, and we'll get started in there. Alright, now that we are in Substance Painter, we can go up to File, New, change it to 4K, and I'm going to have mine set on PBR Metallic Roughness Alpha Blend. That's just what I use. Select the knife, go ahead and open it, hit OK. Once it's loaded in, we'll realize, oh, it looks so good inside of Substance Painter. How did we manage to do that? It's because it's a weighted normal. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and scroll down to Bake Mesh Maps in our texture set settings. I'm going to uncheck thickness and ID because we don't need either of those, or I don't want either of those. I'm going to make my output size 4K, anti-aliasing 4 times. And we're just going to bake selected textures. Now that we're all baked and ready to go, we can go ahead and close that and take a look at our knife, make sure we don't have any crazy burn marks or any issues when it comes to the bake, and it looks like we are muy bueno. So let's go ahead and get started on the textures. What I'm going to do is just break it down into 3 different folders. We're going to name this one Ring, this one Handle, and this one we're going to do, you guessed it, Blade. So with this, you might not have the same smart materials as me because I've bought and made a few myself. So we're just going to follow along as best as you can, or make you pretty much do whatever. I'm not the boss of you. So I'm going to use the SE Faded Wood here. Just see what that looks like on the handle here. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I don't quite care for the lines going in opposite directions like that. So if we go into the faded wood here and take a look at which makes up the lines, we can go ahead and change that if we make it triplanar, I'm pretty sure. So if we tick that, we realize that it is black grain. That is the problem child here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on this. It is already in triplanar projection, which, you know, it is what it is. Let's see if we change it to UV projection. It does kind of fix things up for us. So I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees. See how we look. I kind of like the grain going long ways like so, but in traditional knives I believe it's not the case, so we can go ahead and just Control Z that back to that, and we can kind of increase the scale a bit, or decrease the scale because we don't want too crazy of a grain going. Something like this works for me. So now that we have that here, we can go ahead and place it in handle. I'm going to add a black mask to the handle folder here, and I'm just going to go into the mesh fill. Actually, we're just leaving it on polygon. Go into orthographic view here, and I'm just going to select that. And if you didn't realize, whenever you kind of draw a little square out like so, it's pretty much going through the mesh and reacting the same way on the other side. Especially if your mesh is mirrored like mine is. If it's not mirrored, you might want to use the Substance Painter mirror option, as it might work a little bit better. Just like so, works for me. So we can get out of this view, and if we reference our reference image, for me it's on the other screen, but I can go ahead and drag this over to here. We have that little mark there, which I believe it's just a pin or something, so we're just gonna add that in the handle. So I'm just gonna go through and find a material that works best for me. Just go into the Materials tab here, and I can never remember the name, but it's Steel Rust and Wear. I like this material a lot. For me, it's a good material. We can go ahead and plop that into the handle folder here. Add a black mask onto it, and then we're going to enable our mirror, make sure it's going straight down the center. Go over to alphas here, or brushes rather, and we're just going to select basic hard, and I'm just going to stamp it right there. Should be the same on the other side, and then we're going to go into our faded wood here. I'm going to add a white mask and press X, just so we can get rid of the wood where it is, so we don't have the wood grain behind this mark here. So if we go through, we can double check everything. It's a bit of a brighter color, I believe. We can go into kind of a yellowish color. It kind of reminds me more of a bronzy colored, so I kind of like that shade there. Next up, all I'm going to do is just Control C and Control V actually, we're not even going to do that. I'm just going to copy the mask. I'm going to add a fill layer underneath. Add a black mask. Paste into mask. And then we can add some height to that, whether we want it in or out. I like it sticking out just a little bit, and in fact we can just go and alt click the height and see if it works better for us above the steel or below the steel, and it doesn't make a difference, so it's fine by me. Go ahead and name this height. Pump those numbers up a little bit, and I like to add a blur filter to things that have height to it, because for me it seems like it just makes it pop out a bit better. Just kind of turn it down a little bit. Looks like it pops more, in my opinion. Now that we have the height there, if we notice on our reference it has 3 little holes. So we're going to do those 3 little holes. It doesn't have to be exact or perfect. Got our 3 little holes there. Looks good. Make sure the reference is matching. And now with the handle, we can go ahead and copy this mask. We're going to add a new folder and call it Accents. Go into our Smart Materials here, and I'm just going to select Bronze Armor. Pop that right into the folder. It looks good. Now we can go in and untick edge damages because we don't want it to be that damaged. And then I'm going to put that into the actual accents folder here. We're going to add a black mask, paste into mask, and then we're going to invert the mask to where it is on the handles and not on the wood. Then we can go in and just select things that we don't want to be that color. I'm going to leave this here selected because on our reference it looks to be about the same. So the next step, you're like, how do I add the cool little fancy thingies on the side here? Well, we got alphas that Substance Painter ships with, and there's also alphas that you can make. Any type of design will work. You can also do some spacing and this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is just go through and find some alphas that look good on it and just start stamping them. But we need to actually add a height map to do so. So I'm going to add a fill layer, give it a black mask, and then we can go through and start selecting what type of designs we want to have on the blade. So I already have like a pretty decent library of shapes and patterns and everything, but on our reference it's a lot more simple, so we kind of want to just stick with simple. So I'm gonna try to make it look somewhat decent like the reference. So I'm just going to keep my brush set on basic hard for right now. Make it pretty small. Then with this, I'm just going to add some spacing. See what it looks like. And I'm just holding shift as I click. So we can make the dot a little bit smaller and kind of crank down the spacing just a slight bit, just to see what we're looking like. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to start here and just kind of follow the edge of the knife to the best of my abilities. And the best thing we could do is go into orthographic view by pressing F6. I'm just going through and kind of cleaning it up a little bit there. Okay, the next thing we can do is actually go in and find some alphas that look like they would go pretty good with this design here. So I'm just going to use the circle dots and just hand place in some sort of design. Doesn't have to be crazy fancy. Make sure your mirror's on because having to replicate what you did on the other side is kind of annoying. So I'm pretty much fine with how that is. I'm going to go back into our thing here and just alt-click height, and we can bump the height up on it. And then you guessed it, we're going to add a filter and a blur just to kind of make it pop a little bit more, not look so sharp. I like how this looks. So we can get out of orthographic, and now it's time to work on the blade. Now, on our reference, if you'll notice, it is Damascus. I like Damascus a lot. I have yet to find a good Damascus smart material or even material in Substance Painter, and I'm not really great at making my own, so we're just going to skip the fact that this is Damascus, and we're going to make it just a regular blade. So for our blade, let's go through and look at our smart materials and see if we can find one that works pretty well with us and what we want to do. I'm just going to search metal. Try to find a decent looking one. Let's see what Steel Dark Age looks like on this. I am quite happy with how this looks. We can kind of tweak the settings, so I'm going to drag and drop that into the blade folder here. Add a black mask on the blade folder. And select just the blade. Go ahead and turn our mirror off here, and we can go through and tweak some of these settings. So we just need to take a look at what does what. I believe this is like edge wear. So let's turn up the balance a bit more, and what do you know, it is in fact the edge wear. I'm going to make it a bit brighter, and then on top of this I'm just going to add a fill layer and go and just alt click color here, and well, color and metal, and we're just going to turn down pretty much all the way a lot. We can add a black mask to this. Instead of a black mask, what I'm going to do is go into our smart masks. I'm going to pick stains and scratches. Drag and drop that onto that layer there. And we can invert and just turn down that slightly because we want some darkness on the blade and some of those scratches to kind of make it look like a decently used blade. We don't have to go too crazy with it. And for this, I'm just going to increase it just slightly. See where that dark spot is coming from. I believe it's this one here. In fact, we can go ahead and I'm fine with leaving it, honestly. It doesn't matter from a far distance. So we have our C-axe knife here. We can go a little bit more crazy into the color and whatnot, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks. It looks like a decently used knife. So to export this, if we're happy with how it looks and we're finished with it, we can go ahead and do File, Export Textures, find a good location for the textures to go. I'm going to select my CX knife folder, select the folder, make sure you select it to whatever texture set setting. I'm going to do 4K and just export the textures. Now that it's finished, we can go ahead and close, and we're going to open this up in Blender. Now that we're here in Blender, I'm going to go ahead and take this and rotate it 90 degrees on the y-axis just so it's laying flat, and we can add a plane here. GZ. Going to take everything and just rotate it on the X to where it looks like it's actually sitting here on the plane. Just like so, and if it's poking through a little bit, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. You can kind of scoot it back up a little bit. Just like so, we have our knife. I'm going to add in a camera. Control 0. Oop, wrong button there. Let's try that again. Control Alt 0. Move this into a good position. That works good for me. I'm going to change the camera perspective or focal length to 84, and we'll just bring that back out. Just like that. Now we can go into the shading tab here. Click on something on the knife so we can get a bit closer. And I'm just going to Control-Shift-T because I have Node Wrangler enabled. Go to our knife location and we're going to grab everything except for the height because I don't really care for that. For me, I have to untick relative path. We have that on there now, and the only thing we need to do is invert the normal. So I'm going to move this slightly over, Shift A, separate RGB, separate RGB, combine RGB, and then invert. So red goes to red, blue goes to blue, green into color, and color into green. We're going to click all three of these, Control G, select the group inputs here, just plop it in, and it fixes our normals for us. So let's go ahead and take a peek of what it looks like in cycles mode, and we notice it's dark and pathetic and sad. So we can go ahead and save this. I'm going to press Alt V, go into Look Dev Plus, rotate the lights kind of how I like them. We'll just press R to keep it at the rendered setting. And then what do you know, we have our knife. Next up, I'm just going to double tap A and then Q, just add in some hops lights, just to kind of spice some things up a little bit, add some color variation. And we look pretty decent. I'm going to go ahead and add a color to our floor material just to make it slightly darker. And from here we can go ahead and render it. Okay, now that we have it rendered out, it looks kind of plain and boring, so we can go ahead and move our render over to our other screen. If you don't have another screen, you can still follow along. We'll go into compositing here, tick use nodes, and if you don't have a second screen you can always add in a viewer and just connect the image into the image slot. So what I'm going to add in is a mix shader, and then we're going to drag in the AO to the image. We're just going to swap those two, go from mix to multiply, and then we can add in a color ramp onto the AO part itself, and you can kind of tweak and tighten up how much ambient occlusion you want on the knife, and that works for me. So if we bring out our render, we have some nice ambient occlusion around the knife itself, and that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys liked the video. I know it was quick and kind of a little bit unorthodox here and there. I just wanted to take part in the challenge a little bit, let you guys know that I am still alive, and I wanted to thank all of you who have checked in on me, make sure I'm good to go. Also, I wanted to thank every one of you personally who have bought my new Game Ready AR-15 weapons course. If you would like to purchase that, me and a guy named Josh Johnson, aka Nighthawk, put this course together. We feel that it is pretty good and pretty valuable for what you're paying. If you don't like the course, you at least get a $30 Game Ready AR-15. So, if you like the video, please like it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And in the meantime, I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.